The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has a lot of problems. First, between Gwen, Peter's mysterious parents, Electro, Harry establishing plot points for future films, and the Rhino, the film is simply trying to juggle far too many plot points and jumps between them at an almost random pace. Then there's the fact that each of these topics alone have their fair share of issues, like the opening scene with Peter's parents. Outside of any other problems I have with this stuff, what is the scene even establishing? The only thing I can glean from it that comes back later is that Peter's dad managed to upload these files, which is why Peter is later able to watch his video message. But that isn't really something that needs an explanation. Like, the video could just exist. It could have been left on the hard drive in their old home or something. But no, instead, the first 7 minutes are devoted to this nearly worthless scene. Speaking of wasted time, then there's this whole fight with the Rhino. I get the idea of showing Peter fighting crime and how this connects to him almost missing his graduation and not being there for Gwen's speech. But still, I wish that the film found a way for this to tie into this movie in some important way. Instead, the Rhino serves mostly as setup for a future film and gets a little moment to show Peter victoriously deciding to fight crime again at the end of the movie. Using the Rhino for that, spending so much time on him this early on, it leads to a movie that, in its first 14 minutes, already manages to feel directionless and slapped together. Then there's Electro. The idea of a character who becomes a villain in part because of their obsession with Spider-Man is something I find pretty cool. But the way the movie goes about it, it's hard to take all that seriously. From the massive shrine he has, to the lengthy scenes of him chatting to himself as though he's Spider-Man, to his incredible focus on Spider-Man remembering his name, it's all pretty over the top. What's worse than that, though, is how most of his narrative momentum as a villain is stolen as, after his and Spider-Man's first confrontation, he's immediately thrown into this weird prison. Also, there's this scene where Gwen tries to look into his identity and what happened to him using Oscorp's computers, but her access is revoked and the Oscorp guys try to catch her. However, after she leaves the building, they forget to try and find her, I guess. Why were they trying to catch her in the first place then? It doesn't make any sense, and for some time, makes Electro feel like a dropped plot point, which also, much like The Amazing Spider-Man 1, gives that sense that this movie is going to ignore a lot of logical progression of the plot in favor of just doing whatever. Oh yeah, and at this point, just as Electro is coming to his own, Harry has become the new main antagonistic focus. Overall, I just didn't really buy his and Peter's friendship, but whatever. We don't have time for the little complaints. Let's go straight for a big boy problem. See, as Norman dies of this weird goblin disease, Harry learns that he too is suffering from that same ailment. Because Peter takes pictures of Spider-Man, he asks Peter for help. After all, he's learned that the creation of Spider-Man ties back to Oscorp's research and that it could heal him. Peter, however, doesn't want to give him his blood, and eventually outright refuses. Why? Because he's worried that his blood will harm Harry or that he'll use it for something bad. This is the problem with Harry and Peter's relationship being somewhat ill-defined. From what we see, they're supposed to be close friends, even if they haven't interacted with each other in a long time. As such, I couldn't help but wonder why Peter thought Harry would do something horrible with this. Or is he more worried about Oscorp in general? I'm not sure, it's too vague. Plus, when Peter says he's worried the blood will hurt Harry, does he not realize that Harry isn't going to inject it straight into his veins? Surely he's just gonna research it, right? Or maybe not, that never gets clarified to Peter. Now, in a way, I can see why Peter wouldn't give Harry the blood. He did blame himself for the lizard's creation in the last movie, so maybe he's trying to avoid a similar outcome. But this is never stated in the movie itself. It feels odd. Like way more consideration should have gone into this from Peter. Also, since this is Harry's main motivation for killing Gwen, yeah, this needs more focus and it needs to be clearly defined. Then there's the Peter's parents stuff, which pops up at the worst times, like when Peter should be thinking about Harry or Electro more, when he should be doing something so the movie keeps some sort of forward momentum. Instead, no, the parents. It's the parents. This can't just be another blip on the radar. If it's going to be here, it deserves to be a proper focus. And don't get me started on the blatant sequel pandering with how they show all this villain gear in Oscorp. These things existing in shiny glass cases, propped up like exactly what they are. Props. A carrot to dangle in front of a horse, and we're the horse. Get excited to consume more content, baby. Doesn't matter how good of a story this one is. Somewhat like The Amazing Spider-Man 1, this movie also has some mixed messaging, where I can't really tell what it's supposed to be about thematically. There's a lot of focus on time, on people thinking they don't have enough time, on trying to go back to a previous time, on attempting to make the most of the time we have, and on accepting when a certain type of time is over and a new time has begun. Heck, the big final fight even takes place in this giant clock tower. That's symbolism right there. But how does this all come together? What does it mean? On one hand, we have Peter's fears of being with Gwen and hurting her. To me, that reads that he's worried her time will be cut short by him. So this is a fear of not having enough time or taking someone else's. To me, at least based on Gwen's graduation speech at the end, it seems like the movie is critiquing this. Here she talks about moving forward with hope and without fear. So there's this idea that we shouldn't fear our limited time on this earth so much that we get paralyzed and fail to live the life we want to live, or to live a heroic life worth living. Okay, I can get behind that. And yet still, in the context that this movie presents us, well, then I can't. Because Peter's unwillingness to cut himself off from Gwen and Gwen's willingness to run headlong into danger led to Peter's greatest fear being realized, that she would die. I can't shake that feeling that he made a terrible mistake, that it would have been far better if Gwen had gone off to school like she wanted and left this behind, and that Peter was deeply irresponsible to ignore her father's words. Basically, even if the film is saying that this wasn't a mistake, I don't believe that. I don't feel that. Maybe if her death occurred earlier in the film so that Peter had more time to pick up the pieces and make something of this, but, well, that's not what happens, and thematically, I think this end is a big mess. But all this being said, I have a confession to make. I don't hate this movie. I actually kind of enjoy it. But I don't enjoy it for its compelling characters or its plot or its themes. No, I enjoy it as a comedy because I think this movie is really funny. Was this intentional on the part of the film's creators? Probably not. Is this how most people view the movie? I doubt it. Does that impact my enjoyment or change where I'm coming from or make it any less legitimate a way to watch the movie? No. I don't think so. Remember how I said that Electro's stuff was really over the top, like that was some sort of negative? Well, that's only a negative if I'm trying to take this seriously. When I'm not, it becomes an odd comedy, a mishmash of a really, really competent actor and a ludicrous scenario. Some of Electro's lines too, the gravitas with which they're delivered, but the fact that they're often so lame, I can't help but smile.
You wanna know how powerful I am? Yeah? Well, so do I. Now it's time for me to light my candles.
And who are you?
Don't you know? I'm Electro.
One element of this comedy is the music. On one hand, there are some great pieces in here. In fact, certain parts of Electro's theme are great, the type of thing I'd just listen to on my own time. But then there's this part of the song. I can't. It's such a basic rhyme. This is like a rap I'd make. And fans of my 2018 anime cypher will know that's not necessarily a good thing. Or maybe it is. I don't know. I like it. It's funny. I laughed. Oh yeah, and when the Itsy Bitsy Spider theme came in during his and Electro's big confrontation toward the end, I lost it. I love this Electro, man. What a guy. Harry is pretty funny too. Most of his lines are delivered with this same slightly stilted tone with a certain bite to them that after increased exposure loses its initial intimidation factor and instead becomes sort of cute, sort of silly. Then there's the treatment of Spider-Man. At times, this Spider-Man is a hot mess. Like my man is quipping and wasting time while the Rhino is straight up murdering the civilians. A time and a place Spider-Man. Time and place. But I kind of like that he doesn't care. The movie has reached this point where it gives its details so little consideration that now things have simply stopped making sense. They have become absurd as the characters' personalities lose consistency. The contrast between moments like this and Peter seeing Gwen's dad all over the place is so funny to me. I think part of why this works is that most of these actors are doing a good job with the material they've been given. At least I think so. Through the screen, I can sense people that are clearly trying to make this material work, to give it weight and heft and emotional value. In particular, Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man here, I think he's doing great. The man can act, and he shows a wide array of genuine emotions as this character. But honestly, that kind of just makes this whole movie a little bit funnier to me. That mishmash of actors giving serious performances and a plot that's all sorts of stupid. That mixing of disparate elements. For me, that's the movie's main source of comedy. Is that to say that the whole movie works well as a comedy? No. It's still too long. It's still got too much random crap going on. The things with Peter's parents still should have been cut out. But it's not horrible. It's kind of enjoyable. And for me, that's a step up from the first Amazing Spider-Man. But if you've watched my previous Spider-Man reviews, you might have noticed a potential contradiction. When I discussed Spider-Man 3, I specifically mentioned that it doesn't work for me as a comedy, that I don't find it all that funny. But why? One of that movie's main villains is also a silly guy I couldn't take seriously. It also had some over-the-top moments and a mishmash of tones that could definitely make someone laugh, but it didn't work for me. Well, the reason why is simple. I can't make myself watch Spider-Man 3 as a comedy because that's not what I want it to be. What I mean is that after enjoying Spider-Man 1 and 2 the way I did, after they made me feel emotional and truly care about these characters and their struggles, Spider-Man 3 just felt wrong and disappointing. I wanted a great wrap up to those stories, not this, but I didn't care about the Amazing Spider-Man 1. So I went into this movie ready to experience whatever. There wasn't any sort of serious attachment to the previous film holding me down, stopping me from finding this funny. And to me, that's the main difference, which is why I can't blame anyone who disagrees with me. After all, I know many people enjoyed the first Amazing Spider-Man, and there are tons of legitimate reasons to enjoy it. So if I were like them, well, this movie would probably tick me off, or maybe my taste in film would be so different that I'd actually enjoy this. I'm not sure. Either way, this is just to say that if you enjoyed this movie in a different way from me, or if you were unable to enjoy it the way I did, I get that. And honestly, that makes me feel kind of bad for those who cared. In that light, this is pretty tragic. A movie where I can feel like a lot of actors and fans alike really, really wanted it to be good, really went into it hoping for big things. And instead, this Amazing Spider-Man series was left as an unfinished story after negative reception. But the fact still remains that, to me, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a pretty darn funny film, and one that I'm far more likely to watch again than the first Amazing Spider-Man. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video, and for those of you who have watched all of these Spider-Man live-action film reviews I've made, I hope you enjoyed each of them and liked this journey through them. Either way, hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow for another video.